Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 10 of The Rat and the Raccoon with Nukes and Wheezy. Today, we're going to be talking about our favorite boss fights throughout the years. Very, very excited for today's topic, but also very, very excited that the podcast has hit double digits for our episode numbers. And thank you all for tuning in and listening to us. We really, really do appreciate it. Without further ado, Nukes, take it away.
All right. I just picked some bosses that I always liked from my childhood, and the first one I picked was Red from Pokemon Gold and Silver, or Heart Gold and Soul Silver for the remakes. But it's the final battle of the game after you've beat every gym in both Johto and Kanto. So you've even gone back to the original games areas and beat all those gyms, beat the Elite Four, beat the champion. You've caught your legendaries. There's nothing left to do but go to Mount Silver and face the trainer you played as in the original game. And he says nothing to you. It's just dots, and the battle starts. And he has all the starters that you could pick from in the original game, and I think there's a Lapras and a Snorlax
Mm.
um, that you would come across in that original game. And it's just like this dose of nostalgia for you. And he's a tough fight. I mean, if you're not an expert, but he's got like a level 88 Pikachu. He's he's tough to get through, but it's very rewarding, and just the nostalgia dose you get from this, and that's all it is. It's just the fundamentals of Pokemon boiled down to the two trainers battling it out, and then after you win, he's gone. Not a word. He vanishes. You beat him, and
That's funny.
yeah.
Like, I didn't know that when we talked about this before, and you were telling me you were going to talk about Red. I didn't realize that that was the person you play as in the very first game. Now, I do have a question about this, if you don't mind me
Mhm.
asking. Is there any
Yeah.
indication when you're playing the game beyond the Pokemon in his loadout that that's the original character from the first game?
I think it says Pokemon Trainer Red, and that's one of the names you can pick from the when you first play Pokemon Red and Blue. Red is one of the name options, and that's his
Okay.
official canon name. And the Gary Oak, or his rival, his name's Blue. And when you fight his gym in um he takes over he takes over the Viridian City gym, and his name's Blue. So that's kind of a that's your hint, I
That's
guess. Is it?
your tell. I completely forgotten about those names from the first game. I literally haven't played those since I was a kid. But
Mhm.
yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah.
I think you can. I think I never played Sun and Moon, but I think Red shows up again as one of the leaders, and I don't know exact. It doesn't use gym leaders in Sun and Moon, I don't believe, but Red's one of those. So that's you get to go against him again in the future. But in this game, he's the biggest bad in the whole game. He's
Mm.
not bad, but you know what I mean. It's the perfect battle to end the game with that dose of nostalgia, and
Hmm. How many
it's
years
very memorable.
between Pokemon Red and Blue and you seeing Red
uh,
again, roughly?
let's think Red and Blue was when did that come out in the US? I think 97, 98,
I would imagine
and
around then. Yeah.
I think it's like 2000, 2001. It's like
Oh
a
yeah.
few years between.
Yeah. Definitely for people who are our age, that time between maybe like 1997 and 2001 is definitely, it doesn't sound like a lot, but you're actually going from being like a child into your adolescent years, right? So there is like an actual weird callback to your childhood, even though as an adult that doesn't seem like a very long span of time. But when you're a teenager looking back on your childhood years, it seems longer for some reason. But that's super super cool.
Yeah, it's those 3 years. It felt a lot longer, or however many years it was. It felt a lot longer when you're a kid, for sure.
They really do. The summers especially always felt super super long before the days of part-time summer jobs and
Yeah.
gallivanting and messing around for sure, for sure. I'll go to my first one if you'd like me to.
No, go ahead.
I'm gonna do it anyway. I was gonna start off with one, but it's super super long. And I think it might be better if I do this one first. So I'm gonna talk about Queen Goma, from Ocarina of Time. Now, this leans into a more kind of like nostalgic first time type of experience more so than anything else. So here it goes. We've mentioned A Link to the Past quite a few times in the history of this podcast, but it is one of the all time great games. There's no question of it. Sunk so many hours into that game growing up, and I know you did as well. And it's always going to have a special place in my heart. Now, we all know that A Link to the Past is a top down 2D game. And while the environments and bosses are super, super well designed for that time, us as kids would have to kind of use our imaginations to a certain degree to put ourselves in Link's shoes, or better put, like, we'd have to imagine what Link would see through his eyes from his perspective rather than just the top down view. So, with the arrival of the N64 and with Ocarina of Time, our imagines, or sorry, our imaginations had to do less work in that regard with Zelda. So a big realization moment about that for me was with the Queen Goma fight in the Deku Tree. And what like a great first fight too for us to have with regards Zelda in 3D, right? She's this arachnid like single-eyed monster that has the ability to climb up along the walls and the ceiling, and at times too we'd have to use our first person view to get a good look at where she's at, or if you wanted to give her like a wallop with your slingshot, you know? And there was just something so creepy about seeing her crawling in the three-dimensional environment, and that eye as well, it just scared the shit out of me as a kid. It was really really freaky. I could have had it on my list of scary moments that we talked about previously. Now there might be some people listening and thinking to themselves, well, that boss fight itself is easy enough and there's nothing overly remarkable about the boss design and creature. And I totally agree, but that's not really what, the point I'm trying to make here. My overall objective here is just to kind of like convey that this boss fight was special to me and that it threw me into what felt like a completely new type of immersive experience on what was a new generation of games consoles at the time. And it just kind of made me fall in love with gaming even more.
Yeah, it's actually a really important boss fight for gaming history because Zelda was the first game that ever had the targeting that is
Mm,
so common now, where you target on to you use it in every game. You target on the enemy and attack. It's the first game, isn't it? It invented that, I believe. So that's the very first boss fight to ever use that.
hmm And yeah, you get the experience with I think it was called Z targeting because that was the button on
Hmm.
the back of the controller, right? You
Hmm.
get that feel for it as you're, playing the initial kind of couple of hours of the game and you're getting used to it. But the big realization moment of, oh wow, Zelda in 3D is here is really within that fight, and seeing that boss, and like looking back on the clips of it on YouTube over the last couple of days, I'm like, it doesn't look, the best in comparison to the graphics that we have nowadays. But I remember at the time just sitting there being blown away and being like, oh, this is what it's like to fight as the hero. It gave me a
Hmm.
real immersive sense that I hadn't experienced before, and I love it.
It's a great introduction to the game. It's very nostalgic. I still going through the Great Deku Tree down to fight her is still, when you see her, I think her eye opens up in the
Hmm.
dark. Is that what happened?
Yeah, that's
It
right. and
still gives me that little twinge of nostalgia or whatever whenever it happens,
and
whenever I've replayed it.
and something that's literally just popped into my head now, what gave me a very weird feeling too was when you walk into the boss area for the first time, the door closes behind you. Link actually turns
Mm-hmm.
around, I believe, if I'm not mistaken,
Mm-hmm.
and is kind of surprised that the door is locked behind him and there's nowhere else for him to go. And that hit
Mm-hmm.
something in me too. I remember that being like, oh, oh, we're stuck. We have to do this now. Once again, just felt very, very immersive and pull me right in. It was, yeah, it's always going to be a special boss fight to me. In my memory for the rest of my days for sure.
Absolutely. M- Mine kind of links with that because not no pun intended because mine's a Zelda boss is Ganondorf from Wind Waker.
Nice.
I love a lot of the bosses in all Zeldas, but the atmosphere of this one is the main reason I picked this because I don't know. Did you ever play Wind Waker? I don't remember.
No, I know the character design that you're talking about though, but I've never actually played it
Mm,
through. No.
okay, well, in Wind Waker, it takes place like 300 years or so after Ocarina of
Mm,
Time, and the Zelda timeline gets split at the end of Ocarina of Time. So this one is the one where there's three. There's like one where when you beat Ganondorf in Ocarina of Time, and Link is sent back as a kid,
mm,
and this is one that continues on from the world where you defeated Ganondorf in the original. I mean, in Ocarina of Time, and there's no hero because there's like this. Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf are constantly reincarnated. They always show up at the same time to fight. But because of Zelda sending Link back, there was no hero to
mm,
be reincarnated. And when Ganondorf came back again, the gods had no choice but to flood Hyrule to lock him away. So Ganondorf has just been um, chilling this whole time. It's all of the whole all of Hyrule is like just the Great Sea is what they call it. So you're
mm-hmm.
really going from island to island, but this would have been like the mountains tops of Hyrule. Anyway, all that aside, eventually you do get to go to the bottom of the ocean to the frozen Hyrule. It's been frozen in time, and Ganondorf is trying to hunt down uh, the new Zelda to get her Triforce and get the pieces of the Triforce of Courage so he can put them all together and wish for Hyrule to come back for him to rule. He wants to raise it from the uh, bottom of the ocean. When you find at the end of the game, he gets all three. He has his Link and Zelda. You're all there together on top of this um, just desolate. It's not desolate, but it's like a abandoned Hyrule castle at the bottom of the sea, and he's about to wish for Hyrule to rise back up, but you have this I'm not explaining this in a great fluid way,
You
but
are.
bear with
No,
me.
no, this no no
Okay.
no, this is great. This is great. No, you are. You're doing awesome.
You okay. You have this companion with you the whole game. His name's the King of Red Lions. He's really the spirit of the last king of Hyrule. And he appears there at the last moment before Ganondorf can wish to bring Hyrule back and rule over it as the Demon King. And he wishes instead for the people that live on the Great Sea to have hope and to wash away the ancient land of Hyrule. And it just sets this great stage for this final boss fight. You're on top of Hyrule Castle. You and Zelda are together fighting Ganondorf with the sea crashing around you.
Nice.
And it ends with you sticking the Master Sword into Ganondorf's head and he turns to stone.
Oh yeah.
And the ocean crushes Hyrule and it's just washed away in this timeline.
Whoa.
Just this very dramatic,
Mm.
a very good set piece. As and the music's great. It was just every boss fight's music's great, but I just it's always stuck in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I really like the part that you mentioned there too. Not like I've played a little bit of it, but like I haven't played it all the way through as I'd mentioned. Um but the part you mentioned, like the spirit of the king coming in clutch, like was that like a last second thing too? So you're kind of like, oh shit, this is about to happen, and he comes in and
Yeah,
like says,
he's
awesome, yeah, okay,
Well, the last time Ganondorf made a wish on the Triforce, he made the he fucked up Hyrule and Ocarina of Time.
Mm,
Where it's all dark that's and he corrupted the Sacred Realm, which is the Dark World in Link to the Past. Because the Sacred Realm's like gold, it's supposed to be golden and beautiful and wonderful,
hmm
where the Triforce is held. But that's why the Dark World exists in Link to the Past,
hmm
because Ganondorf got his wish.
I wish Ganondorf would stop my Monday mornings sometimes. If he just, wake up, have to go
But
to work. She's like, no, Ganondorf is out and about today, lads. Stay at home. That'd be nice. that's that's awesome. I'm gonna look that fight up at the very end of the podcast. We finish up like straight away is what I'm trying to say here. That sounds like super, super cool. That ties back to the Easter egg, right? That you had mentioned in the podcast two
oh,
episodes ago, right? Didn't you mention something?
Wind Waker one, yeah. What was it?
The
Was the
Kakariko village underwater, was it?
yeah.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was the ancient Kakariko village
Yeah.
in one of the dungeons of the
Ah, okay, okay, cool, cool, cool. I was thinking, I was like, this sounds familiar, the underwater thing. But yeah, I remember. I really love that Easter egg because just the familiarity of the homes from Ocarina of Time was like super, super cool. Awesome. I'll move on to my big one.
okay.
So, oh god, bear with me here with this one because this is going to go on and on a little bit. There couple of reasons it's going to go on and on a little bit is because it's from my all-time favorite game. Let's put that out there. I think it is my all-time favorite game. And secondly, the boss fight is just incredible. Very frustrating, but incredible, right? So my next one is King Dice from Cuphead. King Dice to me is the true final boss of Cuphead. He's the penultimate boss if you go for a certain ending, right? The devil is the main boss of the game. Let's just get that out there. But King Dice, in my mind, will always be the true final boss. People can argue with me. I don't care. You're not going to sway me. Because let's hear this description. Let's hear everything out right now. And if you turn around to me afterwards and don't feel like this is a final boss of some sort in some capacity, you're out to lunch. Okay. So let me just give you a quick overview of Cuphead if people aren't familiar with it. It's a run and gun style game that's heavily centered around boss battles, and it's inspired by the style of the cartoons of the 1930s. So a lot of the same hand-drawn techniques from that era were applied in the animation of the game, which is super admirable in this day and age. It is a beautiful game, and you can tell that a lot of care and a lot of love went into its developments. I'm not saying this in a shitty way. The game had its delays over the year with the main title and with the DLC, but it never really comes up in conversation when Cuphead gets mentioned, all because of the level of detail and the level of respect that went in to everything that they did in that game. Now, the game has earned a reputation as being notoriously difficult, and it's true. The game is tough as fuck. So in order to overcome the bosses that you fight against, you need to learn their patterns, identify which weapons might be best suited to the task at hand, and especially in your first time round, pray for a bit of luck too. I definitely did on my first go through of the game. So each level is so challenging, and the thing is, there's such a hell of an endorphin rush when you beat a boss. But there's also that underlying fear too of, oh Jesus Christ, what am I going up against next? So while you have like an awesome feeling of success, it's met with this fear of what's around the corner, or who am I going to have to beat next, or what patterns am I going to have to try and figure out. And it's daunting. I'll be real, it is daunting. Now, in my first playthrough, I remember that one thing I would say to motivate myself was, okay, Wheezy, you only need to get this right once and then you can move on. And I did feel that really helped me keep my motivation up, right? Now, remember that line because it's going to become relevant in a little bit here. So remember that. Okay, Wheezy, you only need to get this right once and then you can move on. So keep that in mind. So let's actually move on to talk about King Dice. So as far as the lore goes, quick overview, he is the secondary antagonist of the game. He has the body of a human, but he has the head of a dice. He's the right hand man of the big boss man, the devil, and he actually serves as the manager of a casino that's owned by the devil. So in the game, you eventually arrive at said casino. I think you battled about 17 bosses at that point and done optional run and gun levels too. So after you arrive in the casino, you begin to quickly realize that this is a change up from the 17 bosses that we've just gone against. And I'm going to do my best to describe what type of a level this is. The level itself is called All Bets Are Off. So if anybody wants to kind of go and Google it too to get more info about it or to watch it on YouTube, I highly recommend it. But I will give a description here to the best of my abilities. So the level starts out on King Dice's board game, and there's 15 spaces on the board. So you've to essentially make it from the starting space all the way to the final space. And you do this by parrying a floating dice that has faces containing either the numbers 1, 2, or 3. Now, each number is indicative of the number of spaces you move depending on which one you get. So it's kind of tricky at first to time the parry to the number of moves that you want, but you get the hang of it after a while. Well, after a few playthroughs, I should say. The first time round you're doing this boss, it just seems like you're hitting random numbers all the time. But anyway, there's 9 numbered spaces along the way. Each of those contains a unique mini boss fight. So each numbered space will always be the same boss fight, and it doesn't get randomized. So after spaces 3, 6, and 9 too, there's a safe zone space that you can land on. So say you roll the first time number 1, 2, or 3. You'll get a boss fight. You beat the boss, and say you've beaten boss number 3. You roll the dice, you get a 1. You land on 4. There's a safe zone space there. So you're good. You don't have to fight anything, and it's moving you along the board. Okay? So once again, after spaces 3, 6, and 9, there's that safe zone space. So at a minimum, if we do the math, if you parry the numbers correctly, you only need to do 3 bosses to get to the end of the board game. Now, the mini bosses themselves are hard, annoying, but not as overly challenging as the main bosses in the game. But here's the kicker. Remember that logic that I had mentioned that I used to motivate myself? You only need to beat the bosses once and then I can move on. Well, that kind of goes out the window here. You need to make it through all the mini bosses to the end of the board game without dying. If you die, the level resets and you're back on the starting spot again, which can be very, very frustrating. Now, the bosses, once again, they're not as difficult as the previous 17 that we just faced. However, it's Cuphead. They're still a pain in the ass. And it's extremely frustrating when you die and you go all the way back to the start. So, there's that. Now, I should also mention as well, so say you make it to the end of your 3rd boss fight, so your final one, you've done, we'll say, all the way from level 1 and you're on space 9, I should say is a proper way of putting it. There's also a start over space at the end. So if you land on the start over space, it'll put you back to the very beginning. Now, it doesn't reset the boss fights. The bosses that you've beaten will stay beaten, and those spaces kind of turn into a safe space, if you will. But you still need to make your way back from space one all the way to the end of the board. And if you mishit that dice parry and you get a number that you don't want, you might have to do extra boss fights along the way. So and you can feel the frustration. Like you can feel how annoying that can be. And especially if you've hit start over, you go all the way back, and then you accidentally land on a boss and you die, the whole thing fucking resets again. So you're back at square one. Now, let's say it's all good. Let's say you do your three bosses and you eventually land on the final space, which is labeled as Fin, Fin. It's all well and good. You're there. However, this is when the main fight actually starts against King Dice. So you kind of feel duped. When you land on the final space, you're like, oh, I made it to the end. And then all of a sudden, King Dice, he starts to attack you on that board. So he only has one attack, right? And what he does is he uses his hand to send out this like long row of 12 playing cards, right? And so they're walking from one side of the screen to the other. Now, 4 of them are parryable. And the most common way to avoid the row of card attack is to like parry those cards one to the next, to the next, to the next. So it requires you to be pretty skilled at parrying and timing that correctly. And if you're like a hot shot at the game too, while you're parrying, you can inflict damage on King Dice. You don't have to wait for the cooldown in between those card row attacks. That's the most traditional way of doing it. I believe there are a couple of ways of cheesing it, but I am a purist when it comes to Cuphead, so I'm not going to be going down that road today. But yeah, he takes damage like any other boss, but he feels tanky based on the amount of maneuvering you have to do with the parrying, and you're just kind of like, oh my god, I just need this to end, I just need this to end, I just need this to end. Now, if you die at King Dice, guess what happens? The game sends you right back to the very start of the board, and all of the bosses reset, and you have to do everything all the way through again until you eventually beat King Dice. It sounds very, very. I know it's a super long description, and I'm very sorry, but I am super, super passionate about Cuphead and that boss, because I just want to articulate that, yeah, it's a very cruel experience. There's no two ways about it. I've watched streams of people do this where it's taken them hours and hours and hours, which is a very common thing. It's one of the most frustrating fights that you'll ever go through in your life. But with that being said, the absolute endorphin rush that you get is incredible. Incredible. And in retrospect, after playing the game hundreds of times on my end, because I dabbled in a little bit of speed running with the game, like very amateur speed running with the game, it is the best feeling of the entire Cuphead experience, hands down. Right now, King Dice is just an absolute slog, and while it provided my most frustrated moments in the game, the chemicals that they went off the charts, dude. When I eventually saw his stupid cube head looking ass defeated, like I remember, it was just incredible, and it is probably up there as my one. It is probably my favorite boss fight of all time. Questions? Sorry, I know I really ranted there, but it's an incredible fight. And fun fact, one of the mini bosses is actually called Mr. Wheezy. It's a cigar that attacks you as well. So I could have gone into more detail about each of the nine mini bosses, and I could, but I'll spare you and everybody that. But yeah, fucking phenomenal game, phenomenal boss fight.
Yeah, it sounds like a real gauntlet, because you have to learn each of the mini bosses to win, and then when you finally get to King Dice. You have to learn his fight as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you die, you have to start all the way over, as you said. And
And then
yeah,
what
I
can
can see how it would be frustrating.
Oh,
But
dude, yeah. And then what happens too is, say you do it a couple of times, you get to King Dice and you keep dying at King Dice, and you've gotten kind of better at the route that you want to take, so you kind of get better at the dice hits, and you get more familiar with the boss fights that you're on. But what can happen is you can fuck up that dice parry, and you'll end up on a boss that you're not familiar with, and you'll just go right back. It's oh man, it's killer. It really really is demeaning. Like at certain points, you're really feeling like you're getting fucked by the game. But that's Cuphead in a nutshell. That's the joy of that game, is knowing that you've beaten something that's incredibly difficult, and just the sense of achievement, as I said, that comes along with it is just priceless, unbelievable, great game.
you could also, like, I know you get the dopamine hit from the boss fight, but since King Dice, he would be like gambling. I assume it's like a gambling.
Mm-hmm.
I've never played Cuphead, so it's like the dopamine of winning a gamble.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way of actually. The comparison there is actually sick. I've never even thought about that. That's actually really, really smart. There's another thing. It's kind of like mentioned, like just bring when you bring that up as well. That game, every time I watch it, if I'm watching somebody play it, I'll notice something new every single time. There's so much going on in like the backgrounds, because you're so heavily focused on the boss fight at hand that you miss a lot of the stuff that's actually happening in the background. Um, in particular, the rat fight. I always call it the rat fight. I always call
The red.
him, yeah, Mortimer Mouse. It's not his name though. I can't think of his name right now, man. Yeah, it's my all time favorite game. I can't remember what his name is, but I noticed when you use like one of your powers in the boss fight, it actually shakes the items on the shelf in the background, and I didn't notice that until I would say like 3 or 4 days ago when I did a playthrough here. I was like, oh my god, how have I never noticed this before? But the game is littered with little touches of detail like that, and it just goes back to what I said about how so much love and care went into the
Hmm.
development of that game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've seen playthroughs of it, and they really took their time making that game, like, to make a quality experience.
Oh, for sure. The DLC is out of this world too. I remember every stream I did on Twitch, I would always mention Cuphead. Not every stream, but like a lot of streams. I like, oh, DLC. I can't wait for it. Like, hope it's going to be any day, you know. Um, and when it came out, it could have easily flopped from the perspective of the hype was so real for that across the board. Like everyone was so excited for it that it could have easily gone to shit for them based on how long it actually took to come out. But like I said at the beginning of the spiel here, the care and the attention to detail and the respect that they give that game is probably the most I've ever seen. And it just didn't matter that it took years and years and there was delays, because that DLC blew every fucking expectation that I had out of the water. Anyway, I think we should move on because I could literally do lectures on how great of a game that is. But if you guys haven't played it, I highly, highly recommend picking it up. Even full price. Now, I'm not even going to tell you to wait for a sale. It's worth it at full price, and the DLC is extremely fun as well.
Sweet. Um, Moving on to my next one is Chrono Trigger again.
Sweet.
It kind of picks up with what we talked about in the weapons episode. I picked the Masamune, and this is the purpose of the Masamune is to fight Magus. Um, Throughout the early parts of Chrono Trigger, Magus is this mysterious kind of figure. He's the king of the mystics, with mystics are like the monsters you fight, and they're at war with humans in the Middle Ages. And after you've done that long quest to build Masamune, going back to the prehistory and all this and that. You finally are going to fight him because you think he's the one that has summoned Lavos, the final boss of the game.
Mm.
And you go through a gauntlet through his fortress. There's his three generals, Ozzy, Slash, and Flea, which obvious names for rock fans.
Oh yeah,
Um,
nice. Hell yeah, that's cool. I like that.
I think in Japan the condiments are like mayo, ketchup, and something else, and
that's a,
mustard. But
that's such a strange difference in the localization of the game there, right? One country has a set of condiments and the other is like, let's do a bunch of rock stars. That's really funny. I like that.
You gotta. So there. That's really well two bosses because Ozzy's easy, but you have those two bosses you have to fight, his generals, then his 100 monster army, and I believe someone did go through and count all the enemies that you end up fighting, and it is 100. I'm not gonna say
Oh.
for sure that it is, but it's a whole gauntlet to get through him. He's playing. There's mind games played on you through it, and then you finally make it to his chamber, and it's just pitch black. As you slowly walk up, his these flames light up along the aisle as you're walking.
Mm.
His torches, and there he is. He's just this this beast of a character, and you think you're there to stop him from summoning Labos, and it initiates this insane boss fight. It has some of the greatest music in the game, and a game filled with great music.
It's a high compliment.
Um,
Yeah.
and it forces you to play with the element types of magic that you get in the game. Because every character has like electricity or fire or well, not electricity, light. Sorry, I was thinking yellow. Um, and he has a new one, Shadow, and you have to. He has some cool attacks. You just have to. I'm not explaining it very well, but
You are. You are being very hard on yourself. I'm hanging on to every single word here. Like, no, honestly, for real, man. You're crushing it.
well, it's just a great. There's a great build up to it. It's
Mm.
very atmospheric. The music's great. It forces you to use some different strategy with your characters because if he switches to water magic, the only thing that will hurt him is water magic, and
Mhm.
so on and so forth. And then at the end, he does this ultimate attack, which is called, I think, Dark Matter, and it looks like he just shatters reality on a Super Nintendo, mind you. You know, for
Mhm.
the time, it looks like he shatters reality around you to damage you. And then you find out at the end of this boss fight that he was not the one that summoned Lavos. He was trying to summon Lavos to kill him. So you this man you thought was this who you still think he's a bad guy for a little while after this, but he's really been trying to kill the same thing you've been trying to kill this whole time.
Oh shit. Oh, is that like an oopsie moment for the player?
It's like a what? Because it feels kind of
Yeah.
like the end of the game the first
Yeah,
time you
yeah.
play it, and then you realize this is about the halfway point of the game, and
Okay, okay.
you're sent back. He opened Lavos attacks, I think, and I can't exactly remember exactly what the course of events there, but it sends you and your team back to 65 million BC, and you have to resolve something there, and it sends Megas somewhere else, which you find later on. But it just shatters the narrative of the game, and it shifts you into a whole different gear, and it's just a great fight. It's one of the best fights in the game. It's with one of the best characters in the game, and I still love it to this day. I like to sometimes just go on and watch people play it. That's
Oh
weird,
yeah.
but
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah. No, that's exactly what I do with my favorite boss fights as well. I always get super excited if I'm browsing through Twitch and I'll see somebody's on King Dice. Or another one as well is if I see somebody, and this is a very, very rare one, somebody playing Ethan Must Die from the
uh-huh.
RE7 DLC, because I used to, I don't even want to say that I speedran it, but like I did a little bit of speedrunning in that as well, and I love that game mode because once again, it's an endorphin rush when you beat it because it's so challenging. But no, go back to this boss fight. So you mentioned that there is like a gauntlet. Now, it has it the same level of cruelty with regards that I mentioned with King Dice, or are there save points along the way?
Uh, it's not as cruel as that. But you just have a lot of enemies to fight, and those two of the bosses are full on bosses
Mm.
themselves. Two of these generals are. One of them is kind of you're supposed to cheese it. You're supposed to notice because he's a dumbass, pretty much. But the first two, they're like I think it's Flea. When you
Mm.
first enter the fortress, this bat follows you around, and it goes everywhere you go until you make it to a chamber, and you find out that this is Flea that's been following you around the whole time.
It's hardly Aussie, is it? Because of the bat, by chance.
No,
I know.
you would think it would be Ozzy,
Yeah,
but
you would.
it's
Yeah,
Flea.
yeah. Funny. And one thing I wanted to pick up on that you said that I had actually wanted to mention too, for King Dice, and I like when boss fights do this, is, and if I misinterpreted you, do tell me. But it forces you to play a little bit differently, perhaps,
Mhm,
regards how you have to react to his magic. If I picked that up
mhm.
correctly,
Yeah.
yeah, that I love when boss fights do that. It's a very similar thing with the King Dice fight. If you do it in the traditional sense, is like your parry, like I mentioned, your parrying does need to be on point, and you can get away through a lot of the game without actually being very good at parrying. Obviously, it's of great benefit to you within the scope of Cuphead to have those skills, but you're kind of forced into getting good, if you will,
Mhm.
within the King Dice fight. And I love that. I just love that it really puts you out of your comfort zone, and that's what a good boss fight should do, in my opinion.
For sure, because it makes you like maybe you've always liked using these 3 characters. Well, he
Mm.
uses all different types of magic, so you need to really pick, like, who can heal and do this and blah, blah, blah. Because he's gonna switch through all the elements, so you can't
Hmm.
just use, um, 2 characters that use water, because 'cause you're just only gonna get to attack twice
Hmm.
and he's gonna cycle through several different elements. So you have to really it keeps you on your toes. I wouldn't say he's like super hard to beat, but it's just a very iconic boss fight overall.
Would you say, oh, would you say is he one of your like your actual favorite boss fights?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's up there. So no, because it sounds it's funny because it sounds similar to like the King Dice thing. A lot of the same kind of themes going on with like an element of Gauntlet. There's an element of
Hmm.
having to change your play style, and there's just a level of sweet achievement at the end of it. So I was just curious if those are the criteria boxes for you two to actually like put it right up there as your favorite. So that's where that question is coming from more so
Hmm.
than anything else.
And it goes in with the same thing. Well, I think you know that the devil's the bad guy in Cuphead, but
Yeah. Mm.
in Chrono Trigger, you know Lavos is bad, but you don't know Lavos is the actual. You think Vegas has done it. He has
Mm-hmm.
summoned this thing and it's mindless, but really it's not. You know, he's trying to kill it too. It's ruined his life just like everyone else's.
Yeah, it's funny. There's so many parallels there. I never thought we'd be able to draw those
Yep.
specific type of parallels between Cuphead and
Cuphead
Chrono
and Chrono
Trigger.
Trigger.
Yeah, it's awesome though. It's awesome. It's awesome. Cool. What's your next? How long is your next one? I guess is a better question because my next one is it can be long or it can be short depending on how my description goes.
I have two. They're more like honorable mentions, so it's not going to take very long for either one of them, really.
Yeah, throw out your honorable mentions there, and then I'll finish it off with my final big bad boss.
All right. Um, my first honorable mention is, and it's honorable mention because I never actually played this boss, but it's quite famous, I think, especially the song that plays with this. It's Sans from Undertale, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the reason I never played it is because I always play the pacifist route on Undertale, and you have to play the genocide route to get Sans as a boss because he's your friend otherwise. And there Undertale plays with your mind a little bit because it knows that you have restarted the game if you've it knows that and it just knows like if you I'm sorry I'm going to spoil this for you, Weezy, because I don't think you ever played it, and it's spoilers for anyone wanting to play it. But like the first boss, maybe you don't know that you're not supposed to kill the monsters. Well, you can kill the monsters. That's
Hmm.
part of the genocide run, but you feel like you're kind of forced to kill. I think you're Toriel. I can't. Maybe I'm saying her name wrong, but and you feel bad about it. The game makes you feel really bad about killing her. So a lot of people are like, "Oh shit, I fucked up. Let me go back and restart the whole game." And the main boss of the game is this flower. I'm not going to go too deep into him because this isn't about him, and we'll be here all day. But he says, "Oh, you killed her, didn't you?" It says you come back. It knows you've restarted the game because you did that.
Oh, that's cool. I love shit like that.
And uh, and the game, and if you do a genocide run, the game never forgets that you did a genocide run. So even if you start the game later and do a pacifist route to try to see the good ending, the game knows that you went through and you killed everybody.
It's,
Anyway, it makes little remarks.
it makes a remark, but does it stop you from seeing the ending, or does it just give you those like remarks along the way?
I think it's mostly the flower will make little remarks.
Oh,
I'm not,
okay.
but it does know when you've restarted, and it knows.
That's
And
so
this
fucking funny.
this this plays into the Sans fight because he's a pretty tough boss fight, and he's I guess he's trying to stop you from killing everybody else. And he plays with you because the every other monster has just sit there, and when you hit attack and you do a slice, they'll take the hit because
Mm.
it's the genocide run. He'll move out of the way and he'll say, "What, do you think I was just gonna let you do it?" He moves when you try to do that. And if he beats you and you start again, he knows you've done it because he's aware that there's some kind of weird timeline thing going on with
Hmm.
Undertale. And it's just an iconic it's an iconic battle. I've never got to do it because I just don't have the heart to go through and kill everything.
That's fair. That's fair. You're pure. You're pure. That's cool. That has been a game that's always been on my list. I've watched a couple of old streamer buddies back in the day play through it.
Mhm.
Always brings in a very interesting crowd into chat,
Mhm.
and I often
Yeah.
found that I got quite more entertainment out of the chat than I did some of the gameplay at times. But we'll just leave it at that. I think the majority, the gaming community, even that community themselves, will admit to what I'm hinting at here. But that's awesome. And then yeah, your last honorable mention, or your last mention of the boss fights.
Yeah, and this is gonna be pretty quick, but
Sweet.
it's Tristan the Vampire Hunter from V Rising.
Mm.
In V Rising, it's like a survival. It's part survival craft, but kind of like Diablo esque because it's like top down, and it's interesting because it's in most survival craft games the nighttime is dangerous, but you're a vampire, so the daytime is dangerous in this.
Ah,
You have
okay,
to
okay.
make sure you're hiding, and you're the villain of V Rising because you're in a world where vampires were pretty much wiped out. They used to run the world, but they've been wiped out, and you've woken back up, and you decided to take back over the world. It's I guess it makes a little more sense if you're playing online and there's a lot of other vampires because it's supposed to be the vampires are coming back,
Mm.
but it's still fun solo, which is how I played it. And you have these bosses that have it's called V blood, and this when you kill these bosses and you drink their special blood or whatever, you get new abilities. And they always exist on the map. Most of them, they have their own schedules. They're doing their own thing. There's a couple you have to summon, or a couple you have to go at certain times, but most of them are just walking around doing shit, really just waiting for you to walk by them so they can try to kill you. And Tristan is a thorn in your side in the early games, if especially if you don't know, because he's kind of in the middle of the first and second areas, but he's really like a later boss. So
Mm.
you'll run across him and he'll walk the floor with you if you don't know what you're doing. He's it's kind of scary it was scary for me. He's like, oh fuck, there's Tristan. Let me hide in a bush because you can if you kill a certain boss, you can turn into an animal. So I'd turn into a rat and hide in a bush till he went by.
My man. My man.
When you finally fight him, though, it's it's rewarding when you finally can defeat him.
Hmm.
And I think the first time I defeated him, it was even during the day. So I was like trying to fight off catching on fire and him catching me on fire.
Sweet, sweet. Almost like if I'm understanding correctly, like a Terminator style vibe, just kind of coming after you and being a pain in your butt in those early stages of the game.
Yeah, I mean he has his certain path, but it's wide, and he can just show up all of a sudden. There he is, and it's like, oh fuck, there's fucking Tristan. Let me hide in the bush.
It's like
I'm level 12.
like bumping into an old flame in the supermarket or something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, it's like, oh fuck, keep my
Ducking
head
down the
down
aisle.
here. Yeah.
There's a couple other bosses like that too, but his was always, I guess, because he's there so early and you really can't beat him till later. It's really like you're like, okay, now I got to go hunt him down and kill him finally and get rid of him.
That's sweet. That sounds great. Um, awesome. Do you want me to move on to my last one?
Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay. Sweet, awesome. Um, so yeah, disclaimer with this one. I'm cheating a little bit, right? Because I did mention this boss fight all the way back in episode 2. I think it was episode 2 we talked about the music. So
Hmm.
it's Battling from Celeste. So as I mentioned, but way back in the music episode, the overarching theme of Celeste is related to overcoming and dealing with those feelings surrounding insecurity, anxiety, and depression. There's a great message to be found in the game. You're playing as the character Madeline, who's climbing Celeste Mountain all while dealing with those aforementioned feelings. So in the game, there's this character that I'd mentioned called Madeline, who just looks like a more sinister version of Madeline, but it's the physical manifestation of Madeline's insecurities, her fears of like loneliness, failure, like the feeling of being lesser than others, and just in general, like kind of lacking confidence and just being scared. Um, in the fight with Madeline, there's so much going on that I absolutely love. One of those things was the music. So you're physically battling this physical manifestation of all your negative emotions and negative feelings, and there's something cathartic about that in of itself, just being able to like physically fight her. But there's spiritual chanting going on in the background, which is indicative of perhaps and this, once again, this is my theory, in my opinion, of people back in ancient times were a lot more in tune and connected to themselves, so they had like these practices and such as meditation and that type of thing, and I feel like that music is indicative of a message of, try and get in tune with those ancient practices, and you'll perhaps overcome these negative feelings and negative emotions. That's what it seems to me. So that's one of the first things that I love about the fight. Secondly, I just love the gameplay in of itself. I love platforming. I'm a platforming kid. I grew up on it. It's always fun to me. And it's very difficult too. It's got that feeling of Cuphead where you kind of like die over and over again until eventually you get it right. But there's another aspect too that I want to kind of bring up here is as well. And it's when you hit off Battling, right? So say you knock off her, it actually gives you your power back. So your main power, I should really state what that is in the game. Your main power is like you can jump and then you can do an additional dash or an additional jump, right? So what happens is you'll jump, you'll dash, but then you'll need to land back on your feet again to regain your power usually. Um but when you hit off battling, you do actually get your power back without your feet having to land on the ground. And I just had a big realization moment in the way I've explained that about being grounded and
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing, which is it's funny. That just popped into my head right now. But anyway, we can get back to that. But eventually you do defeat Badeline, right? And what I mean by defeat Badeline is you get her on the ground to a point in which you have a conversation with her. And essentially at the end, Madeline and Badeline physically embrace. And Madeline tells Badeline that she doesn't want Badeline to go away, but rather to work together. Now, as somebody who's gone through anxiety and depression, you do hit these realization moments where you're like, this might not ever go away, or I'm always going to experience these types of feelings to a certain degree, but I need to work around them or work with them, not work around them, work with them in my favor, in order to try and just kind of get over it and move along with life and take a kind of more positive approach to everything. I need to just embrace that these things exist, and I need to put certain practices into play if I want to get over them, or deal with them, I guess is a better way of putting it. um and that's essentially what kind of happens here at the end when they embrace. But after they embrace, something super super cool happens. um Madeline levels up, and essentially Madeline kind of like becomes a part of Madeline. They're now like in syncing together, and you level up, and now your dash has suddenly become like a double jump, right? So it's kind of like this. It signifies that once you work with your feelings of inadequacy or anxiety and depression, you come out of it as a much stronger person, and essentially you can use it to level up in life, which I feel is a super super strong message. So while the boss fight itself isn't groundbreaking from how it looks or how it plays, even though I enjoy how it plays, it's just the overall message that it sends across. And it deeply hit me because I had gone through all of those realizations and all those feelings and emotions, and knowing that somebody else has gone through something similar, but being able to create such a beautiful piece of art in the form of the game Celeste around it just almost brings like a tear to my eye, and gives you that hope too that yeah, in time, like I had already kind of like gotten over my stuff to be brutally honest, but knowing that if somebody can take away the same kind of realizations that I had at the end of the game, that there's this beautiful piece of art here that came from what was probably a very dark place at one point, that it might inspire others to do absolutely amazing things in their life. And that's why battling in Celeste will be one of my all-time favorite boss fights.
Yeah, it's a good way of like putting it into an art form because you're doing it yourself. I mean, that's the good thing about video games. But you're like you are controlling Madeline, getting you're climbing over. I guess it is
Hmm.
climbing
Hmm.
over
Yeah.
her problems. And I guess movies and stuff about it can touch on that, but you're not the act of one doing it. So if you've actually gone through something like that, it touches a little more
Mm.
than watching someone else go through it.
Hmm. It does. It definitely hits in a much different way, and that realization too that I had as I was talking about, Madeline needing to be on the ground again to regain that jump power. I was kind of like, oh,
Hmm.
that's definitely a very symbolic message too, with regards, you need to rest, take a moment to re-energize yourself before you can keep moving along, and
Mhm.
keep moving along too is another big message in that game, and a big message that I would say to anybody that's going through any sort of anxiety or depression or feelings of inadequacy. Sorry. It's very, very important to keep going and do everything that you can within your power to get all the help that you can get. You're really in control of bringing yourself out of that hole, and you have a lot more control than you realize. Super heavy, super deep topic, but I feel it's something that's very close to my heart. And
Mhm.
yeah, and I always had people in my life who were great to me while I was going through all of that, and I'll always be forever grateful for them too. So it's just it's I know it's very nice to hear encouraging messages like that. So if you take anything
Mm,
away from the last 10 episodes that we've done, please let it be that.
absolutely. Um, I think I don't have anything else.
No, I'm definitely all done after that for sure. This was great. Admittedly, and we had talked about this prior to going live, or prior to doing this recording, that this was on paper an easy topic, but once you kind of get into the meat of trying to articulate why these boss
Yeah.
fights are good, it's actually quite a difficult thing to prepare for. Um,
Hmm.
but I feel a lot of the topics that we talked about today and the reasoning as to why it's definitely worth the work. um,
Hmm.
and it's definitely, I love hearing about all of as I always do, Nukes. I love always hearing about your perspectives and your favorite things in gaming. And yeah, this was super, super fun. And with that, folks, I will say that wraps up season 1 of the Rat and the Raccoon podcast. We're going to cap each season off at 10 episodes. All that essentially means is we're going to take a couple of weeks off here, look at what we've done on YouTube, have a little peek and see what we enjoyed working on, and develop that a little bit further, and just make the channel and make the podcast a little bit better as we start season 2. But as always, guys, thank you so much for listening. We really, really do appreciate it. We are on Apple, we are on Spotify, so feel free to follow us on those platforms. And until we see you in a couple of weeks' time, take care, look after yourselves. Bye.
See y'all.